And it's on the screen, 2 Timothy 4, verse 10. What does Paul say about him? He's writing to Timothy and he says, "Be diligent to come to me quickly, for Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed for Thessalonica." So it would seem that Demas, this guy, was once on fire for Jesus. So much so that he was serving alongside Paul, traveling around, ministering, preaching, serving alongside Paul. And something happened in Demas' life over a course of time that now he's deserted him, and he's gone back. And what does Paul say? He's forsaken him, having loved the present world. Jesus talks about this in Matthew 13. Jesus talks about, the pull of the temporal world will choke the spiritual zeal and life, has the potential to choke that life from a Christian, to make them unfruitful. And Jesus warns us about this. And here we see in Demas' life an example of it. Wow. That here Paul, 6 years after writing this piece in Colossians, is saying, my goodness, do you remember Demas? My fellow worker, passionate for Jesus, loved the Lord. He went back to the world. He went back because he loved the things of the world more than he loved Jesus. Wow, what a testimony to be given. And may it cut across us a little bit this morning. Sometimes it's good for the Word of God not only to encourage us, but to challenge us. Do you love Jesus more today than you did last week? Or was there a time when, if you're honest, you say, 2 years ago I was on fire for Jesus. I used to share with people in the workplace. I used to pray in the morning. I used to read the Word. But now, I'd rather just go watch a football match. And I'd rather just go down to the pub for a few pints and hang out with my mates. I don't really want to talk about Jesus. Where are we? Where are we? Demas was on fire 6 years later. Something had choked the life out of him. Jesus explained it, as I said, in Matthew 13 in regards to the Word of God being sown in the different types of soil, people's hearts receiving the Word of God. And one of the types, it says in verse 7, that some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked the seed. And in verse 22, Jesus explains to the disciples what he meant by that. And he says, "Now he who received that seed among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word." And what happens? He becomes unfruitful. Unfruitful. The things of the world he didn't deal with. And instead they grew up again and they began to choke that spiritual life and left the fella unfruitful. And that's just a picture of Demas' life there, isn't it? He loved the world. He allowed the things of the world to get rooted and stay rooted in his life. And they grew and they choked him and became unfruitful. May we just be careful with things like that. So, the exhortation we heard last week, in verse 2, continue earnestly in prayer, being vigilant, being watchful, that the same will not be said on our lives. That the same will not be said in your life. The same will not be said in my life. I wasn't watchful. I wasn't vigilant. And before I knew it, the things of the world had got a grip of me again. And I was more concerned with just living after the temporal things, the pleasures of here and now. I took my eyes off the eternal. May that not be said of us.